everybody, how's it going? Marcel Harding here, and if this is your first time, make sure you bang that bell, subscribe, put a like on it, share on Facebook and Twitter. And with that being said, let's get on with today's tutorial. I'm doing an acrylic painting here, a small A4 sized acrylic painting, and I sped this part up. Some parts will be sped up, some parts will be slowed down. And just doing an acrylic painting here with still life with green apples and some red scales. And I'm just doing the background and the foreground. I've mixed the background up with a large flat brush, size 14, with ultramarine blue and burnt umber, which makes a black, but it's more bluish. So I added a bit more blue, and the foreground again with the a grey colour, which I mixed up with the same ultramarine blue and burnt umber, but this time adding white as well. And I'm using a smaller brush here. I'm using a short-haired filbert brush here to fill in these details. I've sped this part up because it's like watching paint dry, just to get the foreground sorted out now that I'm happy with the background. At this stage, it looks pretty rough. It looks really rough. It doesn't start looking really good until about 3/4 of the way through a painting, because I'm a messy painter. As you can see, I'm a messy painter, and just adding a bit of white there. Okay, now I'm adding some red paint, acrylic paint. I'm using a smaller flat brush, and to the red scales here. So I'm using a permanent alizarin. It's got to be permanent because alizarin crimson is a fugitive colour. So if it's permanent, it's okay. Alizarin crimson and a bit of French ultramarine blue to make a little bit darker red, and even more dark red to fill in the darker colours there of the red scales. And again, I'm sped it up a little bit because you don't want to see too much of it so it can get a bit boring. Just filling in there so I can do the dark areas. I put a mid-tone in, and so now I can add in the lights and the darks. And I've got all that, and I'm just going to put the numbers in for the scales, for the weigh-in, with titanium white and a little bit of cabin yellow light, and a little bit of alizarin crimson to be mixed in it, but that's okay, just to get a base color there. I'm also highlighting some of the scales there. It's all good. And I think the foreground is not complete. I'll keep playing with the foreground throughout the painting. I usually do that quite often. Usually with the foreground, I'll just keep updating it all the time. Here I am just adding little numbers to the scales here with the size 0 round brush. And I mix my own black with 60% ultramarine blue and 40% burnt umber, which makes a black, like an ivory black. And just adding the numbers on the scales and that there. There you go. Just slowed it down for this. And I think for the next on the timer on the scales, I think I'll just use the watercolor black color pencil, which I use quite a lot actually, watercolor pencils on my paintings. A little trick I've picked up. I've actually done a video on this as well, but I'm not sure if I've uploaded it yet. I don't think I have. So just taking my time here with this. There's no point speeding this part up, because when you want to do delicate stuff like this, you want to see how I'm doing it. The fun part is painting the apples. It took me a couple of hours to paint this. I did it over 2 days, 2 sittings, 2 days. Came in the next day and worked on it again. There you go. I'm just basically adding a little bit of black to that color to rough it up a little bit, just to make it a little more authentic. It's hard to do a complete round circle. You know what I mean? It's hard to do. Get a perfect round circle, it's impossible. So I'm just using a watercolor pencil here, black colored pencil here, just to do all the nicks on the scales. A little trick I picked up along the way. It's looking good. Just makes it look more real and authentic. That's all good. Now the scales are done for this stage anyway. Now I can start working on the apples. And again, I've used titanium white for the base. Now it looks really white at the moment. It's not gonna always look like that. I've added just a little bit of cadmium yellow light, but as time goes on, I'll add more and more cadmium yellow light to it because it's just way too white now. This is like an apple cut in half. Now an apple cut in half, that's the wrong color. It's just a base tone color, just to get things started and get things moving. I want to get rid of that white canvas. As you can see, a lot of my paintings, I don't do an undertone. A lot of artists will do an undertone. I don't do an undertone because I've never really gotten used to that. You know, it's something I've never really done. But there's nothing wrong with doing an undertone to a painting before before you start. But I'm used to it. They say that the white part of the canvas scares people. It's okay. That's all good. But you can put an undertone on your paintings if you want to, and that's all good. I just don't do it. I've gotten used to not doing it. And I'm using a small size, well, not too small, short head filbert brush from Rosemary & Co. with this here. Just an undertone color. It's not the correct color. It's just what I call a base color or an undertone color. To start things off, get things moving. Just basically filling it in and getting the shape right for it. And the short-haired filberts are brilliant for this. You could use a flat brush as well, but you don't want sharp edges, especially with fruit. I found that with the flat brushes, you're going to get sharp edges, and you're going to get a railing along the edge. You know what I mean? Where the paint is kind of like a hill or a mountain on the edge, and it's hard to fix that. So with the filbert brushes, the angle on the edges, you don't get that sharp edge with paints building up on the edge like a hill. It's pretty cool. So yeah, just taking my time with this. So I've slowed. This is normal time here, just to get it right. I love these filbert brushes. I use long-haired and short-haired filbert brushes for all my still life paintings. I find that the best for still life paintings. I really like the filbert brushes, the short-haired and the long-haired. Excellent brushes for still life paint. Particularly the short-haired filbert brushes. They're really good. Well, I'll use the long-haired filbert brushes in much smaller sizes for scumbling and stippling and stuff like that towards the end. But these short-haired brushes are good for filling in the details. Okay, now I've put a yellow undertone. I've added you can see here that I've added I just added another layer with cadmium yellow light on top of that. And I've done all that. Now I'll basically just, again, like I'll spend the whole entire painting, continue to work on the foreground all the time. Just getting it right all the time, adding shade. Just continuing to work on that foreground. I'm always trying to do the foreground. Now I'm going to go back to the half apples again. With the green I mixed up with cadmium yellow light and French ultramarine blue. That's how I mix my greens. And I can see, now I'm going to continue to play around in the foreground. I usually do that all the time. I'm always mucking about the foreground while I'm painting, because it just you need to continue to update it. Here I am adding a bit more white paint, titanium white here, and I'm just using virtually a dry brush with hardly any paint on it, and I'm pretty much scraping along, and I'm even mixing up a little bit background. Here I'm using a rigger brush, a small size 2 rigger brush, to continue some bit more details on the half apples. With the brown I mixed up with burnt umber and a alizarin crimson, which gives me a good kind of brownish color. And I'm just using that to add a little bit more details to the half apples. And I'll probably use a filbert brush to basically blend a dry filbert brush to basically blend some of that in if it's looking too sharp. There you go. And just take your time with the details. When it comes to the details, always take your time. Just relax and think about things. It looks a bit funny, so I'm going to go and get a filbert brush, like I'm doing here, a small size long head filbert brush. That basically, it's practically a dry brush, a dry brush technique here with practically no paint on it. I'm basically just pushing in the sharp edges so they blend in a bit more. That's a good thing about acrylic painting. You can blend in more. Oil painting, it's not a good idea to blend in because you end up a muddy painting. But for acrylic painting, you can do a bit more blending in. We might have a little bit of white here just to whiten it up a little bit again. And just push the sharp edges of when I use the rigger brush in there so it doesn't stand out too much. Just add a bit more detail to it. And you guys can use this technique at home anytime you want. This will get into the green apples, which is pretty cool. Now I'm using I'm using a size 12 short head filbert brush here to just fill in the edges. So this is really good. Now you can use a flat brush, but again, like the problem with that is that when you're doing a round object, use a flat brush. It piles up at the edges, the paint, and you can't control it. With this filbert brushes, that doesn't do that. And just filling in with a base green coat. I mix my own greens up. I don't have a tube of green paint at all. I just mix them up with French ultramarine blue and cadmium yellow light. And this is basically a medium tone base coat here, filling it up. And then I can add darker colors and lighter colors. I'll just add French ultramarine blue for darker color. Oh, there you go. I've added more ultramarine blue for total range darker color. It still looks terrible at this stage, but don't worry, it'll get better. You just got to give it time. Now here I am adding the light colors here. I'm adding cadmium yellow light to just add the details. Now I've included the sound in this, background sound in this, because I'm using a scumbling technique, and I've got a video later on how to do this. And this green apple I'm doing here, it's actually got a black hole in it, not complete hole, but it's softwood. I'd add that in as well. I'm using titanium white here with a little bit of cadmium yellow light mixed. And I've basically got hardly any paint on this brush. It's the long head size 8, I think it's a size 6 filbert brush. And I've basically got a little bit of white on it, hardly any paint on it at all. And I'm basically using a scumbling technique on how to get these highlights around these apples here, just to make it more three-dimensional. And you can hear me scraping it. That's why I've included the sound. All I'm doing is scraping along with a little bit of white, hardly any white at all. And I'll go back and blend it in more with another completely dry brush to remove some of that stark white if I've put too much on. So I'm basically using a scumbling technique here. Basically, scumbling is in an artist's term, where you put a lighter color on top of a darker color. So that's what scumbling is. You can look it up and Google it anyway. So it sounds like I'm scraping, and I am scraping, really. Scumbling and scraping, I do that a lot because I'm adding the highlights of it. And I'll keep on adding more and more white and taking some of it away as well with another dry brush. I use a lot of dry brush techniques as well to get that three-dimensional look. You know what I mean? You want to have a three-dimensional look because apples are round, they're three-dimensional. Again, I avoid using flat brushes and round brushes. I use filbert brushes for all this type of thing. Long head and short head filbert brushes are great for this. For blending in, short head filbert brushes are the best, and for scumbling in details like this, long head filbert brushes are the best. So this is about a size 6 long head filbert brush, and I've got hardly any white paint on there, and I'm basically pushing it in hard because I don't want, if I had too much white paint on there, I wouldn't be able to control it. And here it is, it gives you that glossy look. And I add a little bit of highlights on them too as later on. I just put a little bit of dark in the edges there. And it's not as hard as you think. I love painting green apples. Actually, red apples are the hardest to paint. There's so much detail in red apples. Red apples are a nightmare for me. green apples are quite easy to paint because it's just green basically. Just going along those edges, highlighting the edges with a little bit of white paint there, and just pushing it in. And I've got white paint on the brush, but it's hard. I wiped most of it off with a paper towel, leaving only about 10% on it. And here I am. I'm adding a bit more white to it, as you can see, and I'll probably take some of that off. It might be a bit harsh. And here's that black hole in that apple there that I'm going around that. I'm adding the white here, and I'll probably go in with another dry brush, completely dry brush, and just scrape around that to take away too much excess white, and then put more back on and keep going back and forth like that. And as you can see, I've added a little bit of speckles there for the light to bounce off. You know, there's always one spot when your light bounces off, and as I put it on there, and then I take more paint off and I go around the edges and lightly push around the edges, but not too hard. As you can see, just take your time with it. You know, I want you to hear the noises that I'm making with the brushes to see what I'm doing here, so I've included the sound to it. A lot of scraping type of sound. You know, that's what I like about acrylics. You can scrape away like that. You can't do that with oils or any other medium. This is what I like about acrylics. You can scrape like this, and you can blend and scrape all day long with acrylics that you can't do with other mediums like oil, because if you did that with oil, it would turn into mud. And here I am with a completely dry brush. It's got paint on it, but the paint on it was completely dry. So this is a short head filbert, larger filbert, and I'm going around the edges and I'm pushing in, removing some of the white paint, the highlight paint that I felt was just overkill. It was too much white paint, and I might go back in and put more in that I've taken away. I've taken away too much white paint. I might put more back and see. I am again. I'm putting more white back in, and I'll go back and forth until I get it right. You know, until I feel happy about it. Yeah, and this is what I'm doing. This is what's so great about it. You can make good paintings in acrylics, and people think they're oils. They're not. I'm using A4 size acrylic paper there on just a tape to a board with masking tape. Just a wooden board at the back on an easel. And I go back and forth, adding white and then taking it away with a dry brush, and then adding white, taking it away. Keep doing that until I'm happy with it. It's a bit of a process. As you can see, putting more white back in because I took too much away, putting the highlights back in, and I'll just keep going back and forth. You know, I mean, it's like, oh, can't you get it right? No, it takes me a long time to get it right. I keep going back and forth. This is one thing about acrylics. You got to keep going like this, working on it all the time. With oils, you'd only need to do 1 or 2 passes. With acrylics, it's about layering, and it's about lots and lots of different passes. Unlike acrylics, unlike oils, I should say. You keep going back and forth. So there you have that. It looks roundish. And then again, I'm playing with it with a dry brush. You see it's got yellow paint on that dry brush. That yellow paint is completely dry, believe me. So I'm just using a dry brush. And then I can go put the highlights back in again. Just keep going back and forth until I figure that it looks about right. And then I can add these things here, which is the stems. You know, apples have stems on them, so I add a bit of stems with basically just burnt umber and a little bit of French ultramarine blue, and then a little bit of titanium white for the highlights. And here I've sped it up because I'm continuing to go back and forth with the white paint and the dry brush. I sped it up because it's like watching paint dry. It takes a little while, speeding it up and using a dry brush here again to push the paint in, and just scumbling technique to get it right. Playing around with it, as you see, because otherwise it'll take forever if I don't speed it up. There you go, speeding it up for that, which is pretty cool, really. I wish I could paint like that as fast as that in real life, but I can't be done. So this painting took a couple of hours, and Oh, and here I am again, playing around with the foreground as I always do. I'm notorious for playing around with the foreground all the time. Here though, it's justified because I'm adding a bit of a dark colour here. I mix all my blacks and greys up with French ultramarine blue and burnt umber and titanium white. So here I go here. I'm just using the same sort of scumbling technique with a little bit of the black colour made up on it, not too much, and then just pushing it in here. And I'd probably go back with a dry brush and on the edges and scrub that in. That's what I like about acrylic paints. See, if you're blending and scrubbing with oil paints, you can't really do that because it goes muddy. That's what I like about acrylic paints. Nothing wrong with oil painting. Oil painting is great. I've done oil paintings in the past, and it's great. But, I couldn't get past the smell of it. Here I am using another filbert brush again, going back and forth, avoiding flat brushes because they give you the sharp edges, and the paint, once you let go of the paint on the brush, on the canvas, the flat brushes, quite often you'll get a pile up on the edges there, and you don't want that. There you go, just about finished the painting, and I can probably go ahead now and sign this thing, and sign this bad boy and call it finished. Here I am signing my name. I'm using a little bit of white with permanent Northern Crimson. Sign my name with a rigger brush, size 2 rigger brush, I think. Just sign my name so I can sign this bad boy off and call it done. And I hope you guys like this video. Like, share, subscribe, and bang that bell, and share it on Facebook and Twitter. And I hope you come back for more tutorials. I also do painting tips and book reviews on famous painters. I hope you like this tutorial on green apples. And there's plenty more in the future. I upload at least one video every week, sometimes two. So don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and bang that bell. And we will catch you guys later. It's been an awesome time. I've enjoyed this painting. Like I said, it took a couple of hours. And take care and cheers.